What would happen if a nation, forgotten by the global powers and written off by economic architects, decided to forge its own destiny? What if a land, blessed with gold, cotton, and sun-drenched fields, refused to be just another exporter of raw dreams? Deep in the heart of West Africa, beyond the glare of international headlines, something extraordinary was quietly unfolding. While the world watched elsewhere, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, a man barely 35 years old, embarked on a mission that could rewrite the future of an entire continent. He didn't announce his revolution with grand speeches. There were no televised parades, no sweeping proclamations. Instead, Traoré went to work in silence, brick by brick, farm by farm, factory by factory. He was reviving dead airlines, laying foundations for manufacturing plants, sketching blueprints for nuclear energy. In a world addicted to spectacle, he chose substance. In a region long trapped in the chains of dependency, he chose self-reliance. This wasn't just governance, it was a rebellion against history itself. But what the international media isn't. Telling you about Burkina Faso's transformation is more powerful than the projects themselves. It's not about a refinery or an airport. It's about the symbolism stitched into every concrete block, every reopened school, every grain of rice processed at home instead of imported. It's about a nation standing up and whispering a word, the world isn't ready to hear yet: sovereignty. A month ago, when we first told you the story of Captain Traoré's early steps, the response was overwhelming. Thousands asked for more. Because, truth be told, no single video could capture the sheer scale of what's happening here. No single broadcast could fully explain the quiet, unstoppable force now reshaping Burkina Faso from within. And today, we go deeper. Today, we step inside the heart of a revolution few saw coming, but none will be able to ignore. Since seizing leadership in 2022, Traoré has unleashed a series of mega-projects across agriculture, manufacturing, mining, energy, and education. But unlike the hollow promises that so often clutter the history of African development, these initiatives aren't staying on paper. They're already breaking ground. You can hear the hum of new machines. You can see the first flights landing on revived runways. You can touch the gold being refined, not across an ocean, but right here at home. What makes this story riveting isn't just the staggering number of projects, it's the precision behind them. Each initiative, chosen carefully, fits into a larger vision, a web of self-sustaining industries, all reinforcing each other, all designed to break the cycle of extraction and dependency that has haunted Africa for centuries. And yet, this audacious dream faces a battlefield strewn with invisible enemies: political pressure, economic sabotage, internal resistance, and the ever-looming hand of foreign interests. Stay with us to the end, because today you will not only see the scale of Captain Traoré's ambition, you'll understand the one factor that could make or break this silent revolution, and you'll discover why the African diaspora might hold the final key. As we peel back the layers of this transformation, one thing will become clear. This isn't just Burkina Faso's story. It's Africa's story. It's our story. And it's only just beginning. There was a time, not long ago, when the skies over West Africa were ruled by foreign hands. 80% of the region's air traffic was controlled not by Africans, but by companies headquartered oceans away. For the average Burkinabe citizen, airports were silent monuments to dreams that never arrived. Flights were scarce, expensive, and rarely under their nation's control. Every departure was a reminder that while the world moved forward, Burkina Faso remained tethered to the ground, watching from the sidelines. But Captain Ibrahim Traoré saw something different when he looked at the abandoned terminals and crumbling runways. He didn't see failure, he saw an opportunity to take back the skies. In a bold move that shocked regional observers, Traoré's government invested a staggering $450 million to breathe life back into Air Burkina. It wasn't just about buying planes. It was about resurrecting a national identity. Fleet upgrades, airport modernization, and a new strategic vision. All of it aimed at transforming Burkina Faso into West Africa's aviation nerve center. Construction crews worked day and night. The dust of progress filled the air, the Ouagadougou da Sandaga, International Airport, once little more than an afterthought, now buzzed with new energy. Prepared to handle over 1 million passengers a year. 5,000 new jobs, both direct and indirect, materialized almost overnight. For the first time in generations, villagers who had once looked up to see planes as distant streaks across the sky found themselves working at gleaming terminals, guiding flights and welcoming visitors on Burkina Faso soil. The economics were undeniable. African aviation was projected to grow at 9% annually over the next 2 decades. With this revival, Burkina Faso wasn't just catching up, it was racing to the forefront. Air connectivity would no longer be a chain that bound them to foreign economies. It would be a lifeline, fueling business investment, boosting tourism, and tying the nation into a stronger regional and global network. But reclaiming the skies was only the beginning. Because while planes soared above, another revolution was taking shape deep within the earth. Burkina Faso is Africa's 5th largest gold producer. For decades, its gold flowed out like rivers of lost wealth, raw and unrefined, carted overseas where others extracted the true value. Gold caravans moved, like lifelines drained from the soil, enriching everyone except the land from which they came. The profits were captured elsewhere. The people who labored for it remained trapped in poverty. Captain Traoré decided to dam the flow. In one of his most strategic and symbolic moves, he commissioned Burkina Faso's first ever gold refinery. It wasn't just another industrial plant. It was a line in the sand, a defiant stand against centuries of economic colonization. The refinery was built to process over 150 tons of gold annually, transforming raw material into pure, high-value gold right on Burkina Faso soil. The impact was immediate and profound. 100 direct jobs were created within the refinery's walls. Over 5,000 indirect jobs bloomed across the mining communities, supply chains, and service industries. But the numbers only tell part of the story. For the first time, miners saw the fruits of their labor gleaming in bars and coins, right before their eyes. Tangible proof that their work meant more than a paycheck. It meant ownership. It meant dignity. The refinery also introduced something that had long been missing: transparency. For decades, foreign companies had dictated the price of Burkina Faso gold, manipulating valuations in their favor. Now, with domestic processing and government oversight, Burkina Faso could finally ensure fair value for its most precious resource. This wasn't just about revenue, though tax collections skyrocketed. This was about sovereignty, about ending the historical exploitation that had kept the nation in a gilded cage. Economic sovereignty wasn't a theory anymore. It was tangible. It shimmered in the vaults of the new refinery. It roared in the engines of Air Burkina jets lifting off the tarmac. It whispered in the hopes of a people who, for too long, had been told that independence was an illusion, yet the path was anything but easy. Reviving an airline meant competing against entrenched giants who saw no reason to give up their monopoly on the skies. Building a gold refinery meant challenging multinational mining interests who were used to siphoning away profits without consequence. Every new project was a provocation, a reminder that Burkina Faso was no longer willing to play by the old rules. In dusty villages, once forgotten by maps, old men gathered outside cafes to watch planes they had only dreamed of flying. Overhead, children pressed their faces to airport windows, eyes wide with wonder at the possibilities stretching out before them. Miners, once invisible laborers in a system stacked against them, now stood prouder, their gold no longer just another lost treasure for foreign markets. These were victories, real, hard-earned victories. But Traoré knew better than anyone. Reclaiming the skies and damming the rivers of gold was only the first step. Because what good is wealth if it still slips through your fingers? What good is sovereignty if it remains trapped in fragile systems, easily dismantled by pressures both within and beyond the nation's borders? Bigger challenges loomed ahead. Manufacturing revolutions, energy wars, and battles over the very soul of the nation's economy were waiting just over the horizon. Taking back the skies had lifted a nation's gaze. But holding onto the ground fortifying every inch of hard-won progress, would be a war all its own. And in the shadows, forces that had grown fat from Burkina Faso's old dependency were beginning to stir. The next battle would not just be about machines and minds, it would be about hearts, minds, and the will to hold the line against a world not yet ready to see Africa rise. For every pound of cotton leaving the fields of Burkina Faso, a quiet tragedy played out. Raw cotton, harvested by calloused hands under the burning African sun, was packed into crates, shipped across oceans, and transformed into expensive fabrics by distant machines. Months later, those same textiles returned to Burkina Faso. Reborn in foreign factories, stamped with foreign labels, sold back at prices the original farmers could barely comprehend. It was not just trade, it was theft in slow motion, a daily surrender of wealth stitched invisibly into every imported shirt and dress. Captain Ibrahim Traoré understood the cruelty of that cycle better than most, and he was determined to break it. Today, under his leadership, that ancient pattern is beginning to unravel. In an audacious move, Traoré's government launched 2 massive cotton processing factories, poised to transform Burkina Faso's agricultural future. No longer would only 2% of the nation's cotton be processed at home. These new facilities promised a seismic shift, one that could push domestic processing up to 50% or more, keeping the value where it belongs, in the hands of the people who grow the crop. The vision was bigger than simple industry. It was about building an entire value chain, stretching from the rural fields to bustling urban markets. Farmers would see higher demand for raw cotton. Spinners and weavers would see new jobs flood into their communities. Tailors, artisans, and exporters would find themselves at the dawn of a new era. Every thread woven on Burkina-based soil would strengthen rural economies, drive up local incomes, and chip away at a dependency that had lasted generations. The fields were no longer places of exile from prosperity. They were becoming the front lines of a new kind of revolution, one rooted not in protest, but in production. And yet, cotton was only one front in this sprawling war against economic dependency. Burkina Faso's diet itself had long been a battlefield. For years, local rice, grown by proud hands in shimmering green paddies, was passed over for foreign imports. Imported rice was cleaner, whiter, more uniform. It was marketed as better, more prestigious. In an age where perception shapes reality, Burkinabe rice struggled not because it lacked nourishment, but because it lacked prestige. Captain Traoré's answer was elegant and cutting-edge. 20 optical sorters, high-tech machines, capable of scanning thousands of grains a second, removing impurities, and elevating local rice to international quality standards. It might seem a small gesture compared to the grand visions of airlines and gold refineries. But to the farmers bent over their fields, to the market vendors weighing sacks of grain, it was a revolution of dignity. With the optical sorters deployed, locally grown rice could finally stand proudly on supermarket shelves, gleaming beside foreign brands, indistinguishable except by price and by pride. Every bowl served in Burkinabe homes could now carry the hidden weight of national self-reliance. Every bite was a quiet rebellion against the belief that better must come from beyond their borders. The restoration of pride wasn't just symbolic, it was strategic. Improved food security meant fewer dollars hemorrhaging out through imports. Stronger agricultural sectors meant stronger rural economies. And most importantly, Burkina Faso was preparing to not just feed itself, but to become a competitor in global markets. Yet as the factories roared and the rice mills whirred, a darker realization loomed overhead. All of this growth, all of it, depended on one fragile thread: energy. Without reliable electricity, the factories would fall silent. Without power, the planes would stay grounded, the refineries would cool into dead hulks, and the dreams of sovereignty would evaporate like mist under the African sun. Energy was not a luxury. It was the spine of the entire revolution. And Traoré had a plan for that too. A plan so ambitious, so daring, that it sent ripples of shock through international observers. A $4 billion nuclear power project. The first of its kind in West Africa. To some, it sounded like madness. Nuclear energy? In a country where even basic infrastructure had struggled to survive? But Traoré saw what others missed. Nuclear power wasn't just about electricity. It was about independence at the most fundamental level. It was about ensuring that no foreign nation could control the heartbeat of Burkina Faso's future. The Atomic Energy Agency was established, engineers were trained, partnerships were sought, and slowly, methodically, plans were drawn to construct a nuclear facility capable of doubling Burkina Faso's electricity productivity by 2030. Thousands of construction and operation jobs were forecasted. Foreign investment was trickling in, sensing the magnitude of what was being attempted. Technological advancements and skill development programs blossomed alongside the concrete foundations of the plant. The goal was not simply to light homes. It was to electrify an industrial revolution, to charge the dreams of millions. Imagine it. Factories humming without fear of blackouts. Schools powered day and night. Hospitals running modern equipment without begging for diesel generators. Internet. Connectivity thriving. A future where energy was not a bottleneck, but a catalyst. But ambition comes at a price. Building a nuclear facility was not merely about technology or finance. It was a race against time, against political sabotage, against foreign powers eager to maintain the old hierarchies. Every day that construction advanced was a day closer to sovereignty, and a day closer to confrontation with forces unwilling to see Burkina Faso stand on its own feet. Traoré knew he was racing against an invisible clock. That every success would breed new enemies. That every inch of ground gained would be contested by forces larger and older than his young government could easily withstand. Power was coming, but so was resistance. Foreign interests with deep pockets and deeper influence were beginning to whisper. Questions were being raised in international circles about safety, governance, regional stability. These were not questions asked out of concern. They were weapons dressed as warnings, designed to slow, to distract, to discourage. And inside the nation, too, old habits of corruption, short-sightedness, and fear threatened to undermine the momentum, the swam. Factories roared, the rice mills sang. The nuclear dream burned like a second sun on the horizon, but the war for Burkina Faso's future was only beginning, and the next battle would not be fought with shovels or construction crews. It would be fought with something far more dangerous, time. Long before a nation can rise, it must first dare to dream. In the quiet, dust-choked corners of Burkina Faso, dreams had once been luxury goods, afforded only to a few. Conflict had shuttered hundreds of schools. Whole generations grew up not with books in their hands, but burdens on their backs. Hope was rationed like food. Knowledge was a privilege, not a right. But Captain Ibrahim Traoré knew that without minds set free, factories would rust, satellites would fall, and revolutions would crumble. If Burkina Faso was to hold its future, it would need more than machines. It would need minds sharper than steel. So, he moved swiftly. Under Traoré's leadership, hundreds of schools flung their doors back open. New schools rose alongside old, ones breathing life into neighborhoods long abandoned to despair. Construction sites buzzed with hammers and laughter, not just building walls, but building futures. Ambitious new universities took shape, designed not to imitate Western institutions, but to forge something uniquely Burkinabe. Hubs of innovation, laboratories of ambition. The goals were twofold. First, to ensure that displaced children, those scattered by war and hardship, found their way back to classrooms, and second, to ignite a spirit of invention across the nation's youth. These were not just centers of learning. They were launch pads for a new national identity, proud, skilled, and sovereign. Graduates would no longer just dream of leaving for Europe or America. They would stay, they would build, they would lead. In Traoré's vision, education was no longer a distant promise. It was a weapon, a shield, a map to a destiny the world said was out of reach. But even with books in their hands, there was another frontier Burkina Faso had to conquer, the invisible frontier. The final battleground wasn't just the earth, It was the skies above it. Burkina Faso would not be left grounded while others navigated the stars. And so, the nation set its sights higher than ever before, the launch of its own satellites. It sounded like science fiction. In a country where just a few years ago, reliable internet was a dream, now came plans for space capabilities. But this wasn't about prestige or flag planting on distant moons. This was about survival, about strategy, about power. In a world where data means power, Traoré refused to let his people remain blind. Burkina Faso's satellite initiative was designed with brutal clarity to monitor natural resources, predict weather patterns crucial for agriculture, and map mineral wealth hidden beneath the soil. No longer would Burkina Faso have to pay foreign nations for critical information about its own land. No longer would farmers guess at the rains. No longer would mining deals be struck in the dark. A single satellite could mean a 15% increase in rice production through precision-guided irrigation. It could mean hundreds of millions saved in disaster response. It could open doors to new industries, telecommunications, data analytics, scientific research, and it was only the beginning. By 2030, Traoré's government planned to launch 3 more satellites, this time expanding into military surveillance and mineral mapping, making Burkina Faso not just a player in West Africa, but a technological hub the world could no longer ignore. The tech sector was projected to explode, 5,000 new jobs by the end of the decade, $200 million in new tech partnerships drawn by the magnetic pull of innovation. For the first time, Burkinabe youth could dream of careers in coding, aerospace, data science, without ever leaving home. But even with satellites circling overhead, the fight for control of the land beneath their feet raged on. Burkina Faso's soil was rich, painfully rich, in gold. But for decades, the wealth had been siphoned away through exploitative contracts, foreign-owned mining operations, and tax loopholes so wide you could drive convoys of gold through them. Despite gold accounting for 80% of the nation's exports, it had contributed a meager 16% to the GDP. The math didn't lie. The system was designed to bleed them dry. Traoré wasn't interested in asking permission to fix it. Enter the new mining code. For the first time in Burkinabe history, the government would claim a mandatory 15% free carried stake in every mining operation. Private Burkinabe investors would be guaranteed a 30% participation rate. Foreign companies would see shorter tax holidays and tougher regulations. This wasn't just economic reform, it was resource sovereignty carved into law. The impact would be seismic. 500 million in additional government revenue projected annually, 10,000 new jobs through local subcontracting firms by 2030, and processed gold exports expected to triple in value, from 1.8 billion to a staggering 5.4 billion every year. But the numbers again told only half the story. This was about dignity. This was about ownership. This was about a country telling the world, our wealth will no longer be extracted like spoils of war. It will be ours to build with, to grow with, to lift our children into futures once thought impossible. It was about standing, finally, not as a supplier of raw materials, but as an architect of prosperity. And across the border, neighboring nations, like Mali and Niger, watched with keen, restless eyes. If Burkina Faso succeeded, it wouldn't just change its own fate. It would light fires of rebellion across an entire region hungry for justice. But no revolution moves uncontested. In the back rooms of international boardrooms, old powers whispered. In distant embassies, warnings were drafted, concerns fabricated. Sanctions and economic advisories lurked like wolves in the mist, ready to descend the moment the new sovereignty showed weakness. Inside the country, too, old habits clung to the power. Not everyone welcomed a future where transparency would shine like sunlight into the old, corrupt systems. Not everyone wanted a Burkina Faso that stood alone without foreign help. The seeds of doubt were being planted, watered by fear. Traoré's government moved fast. But even speed couldn't outrun every threat. For now, the satellites soared, the universities filled, the mines glittered with hope. But just beyond the horizon, storm clouds gathered, because as Burkina Faso built its future from the ground up, old powers prepared to strike back, and the real battle, the one not of machines but of wills, was about to begin. In a world drowned in noise, Burkina Faso chose silence. While headlines screamed elsewhere, in the heart of West Africa, a quiet revolution unfolded, brick by brick, field by field, dream by dream. Led by a man the world barely knew, Captain Ibrahim Traoré was rewriting the rules of what was possible. Not with bluster, but with blueprints. Not with promises, but with progress. We watched as dead airports came back to life, as gold once stolen away was refined at home, as farmers harvested pride alongside rice and cotton. We saw factories rise where none had stood, satellites preparing to pierce the sky, and classrooms filled with the hum of young minds daring to imagine futures once denied to them. It was not just infrastructure being built. It was hope. It was dignity. It was sovereignty made real. But dreams that big do not go unchallenged. Even now, as the engines roar and the satellites prepare for launch, questions hang heavy in the air. Will the global financial system, designed and defended by powers with a vested interest in Africa's dependency, allow this experiment in self-determination to survive? Will hidden hands tighten invisible nooses around the Burkina Faso economy, slow investments, freeze progress, spread fear? And what of enemies within? Those who have grown fat from corruption? Those who fear that sunlight will expose too much? Will they find ways to sabotage from the shadows? Can a young nation really stand when its own history is weighted against it? Or perhaps the better question is, will the African diaspora rise to meet the call? Across Europe, America, Asia, millions of Africans watch with heavy hearts and restless hands. Traoré's vision was never meant for one nation alone. It was, and still is, a call across oceans and deserts. Come home. Build with us. Dream with us. Fight with us. Because when a nation chooses to reclaim its destiny, it needs more than leaders. It needs believers. Believers who understand that sovereignty is not given, it is taken, it is defended. It is built every day with the sweat of workers, the daring of dreamers, the sacrifices of those willing to stand. When others kneel, and make no mistake, the battle is not over, it has barely begun. In the next chapter, we will uncover the hidden forces already moving to derail the Burkina Faso dream. We'll reveal the secret alliances forming in the shadows to defend it. The stakes are rising, the danger is growing, and the clock is ticking faster than ever. If you stand with the dream, if you believe that a nation can rise not by begging, but by building, then this is your moment. Comment "I believe" below if you stand with Burkina Faso's future. Like this video. And share it. Subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter of this hidden revolution, a revolution not broadcast on the nightly news, but unfolding right now, against all odds. The fight for the future has begun, and history is waiting to see who will dare to write it.